Hey there, Bleepin' Jeepers, it's Tyler. We're getting back to Project Tetanus this week. We're going to be swapping front axles. So stick with me and I'll show you how we're going to do that. Alright, so back when I introduced Project Tetanus, I mentioned that we were going to switch the front axle out to a one-piece version. What that means is this older design, they had a central axle disconnect right here that was vacuum actuated. There's a little fork in here, so there's a short length of axle and then another short length of axle that goes out to the wheel, to the hub. And there's a collar in here that connects the two, and a little fork that when you activate the air pressure or the vacuum, it slides that fork over and is supposed to engage these two axles together and give you four-wheel drive. There's a lot of problems with that. You know, obviously you've just overcomplicated a system. You've got three pieces of axle instead of two. The collar is quite narrow. It's got a few large splines and not very many of them, and it's better to have lots of splines and have them be smaller. These vacuum pumps go out all the time. In fact, my first two videos for BleepinJeep were how to just permanently eliminate this from your system and permanently lock the axles together. Another problem with these is the housing itself is in three pieces. So you've got the left axle tube, you've got this little short section of right axle tube, and then you've got another section here that goes out to the hub, and you got a big cast assembly here in the middle. And that is a whole bunch more pieces than I want to deal with. I'd much rather have one solid tube going this way and one solid axle going this way. Another problem with these older axles, up until 1995, on these Dana 30 fronts, Jeep was using quite a bit smaller of a U-joint here on the hubs. So I've set up my caliper here to show you the difference in cap size, and we're going to go over and compare this to an axle out of a 96 Cherokee and show you the difference in U-joints. So this is just all around a poor design. Now Matt has a video already, and I'll link to it, that shows how to do a one-piece axle conversion without changing the housing. But to do that, you've got to pull your differential out and you have to put a seal in on this side, which means pulling your gears and all that. I don't want to do that. I want to fix all these problems in one shot, and I am just going to swap out the entire front axle assembly for that axle that I have in the 96 Cherokee. It'll bolt up. It eliminates this cast section here. It gives me one-piece axles, and it gives me the bigger Dana 44 size U-joints. So that's what we're going to do today. So here we are under the 96 Cherokee, and you can see how much cleaner this is. It's just one piece of tube and one axle tube all the way over. Don't have this big cast assembly in the middle. It's one piece axle. It's still a high pinion, but it also has these much larger Dana 44 sized U-joints. I'll show you that in just a second. And really, if you check your classifieds and your junkyards, you can pick up a Dana 30 front axle for like $100. Just make sure that you've got the same gear ratio, so you don't have to switch out the gears, and make sure that it's a 95 or newer, so it's got those larger U-joints, and you're good to go. So here's what I'm talking about on the size of the U-joints. So this is the cap size on the old style Dana 30. Now look at the difference in the size of the U-joint cap. It's almost 1/8 of an inch larger on this axle. It's quite a bit bigger U-joint, and bigger means stronger. Now there's a number of different ways to skin this cat. Basically what you have to remove is your lower and upper control arms, You're going to have a shock absorber you need to remove. You need to disconnect your calipers, either at the caliper or up here. It's going to be easier at the caliper, so that's what I'm going to do. We need to remove the, there's a little spring holder down here. So we need to remove that so that we can remove the springs. We've got to disconnect the sway bars. And then we can either remove the steering linkage from here, or it's easier if we just pull the steering linkage at the pitman arm and then disconnect the track bar. And assuming you've already removed the front drive shaft, that's everything. We should be able to drop this axle and get it out. So I'm going to start by removing the shock absorbers. This is a 13 millimeter. If you wanted to do bar pin eliminators, now would be the time to do it. The next thing I'm going to do is pull my pitman arm. So it's got a castle nut with a cotter pin. So we've got to remove this cotter pin. And then we'll get that castle nut out of there. 3/4 inch. Now you can whack on these, you can do a number of different things. I'm going to use a pitman arm puller. Or a ball joint puller. See if I can't get this out with this. These can be a real big pain in the neck. Go check out Matt's video on how to pull a pitman arm, and you'll see worst case scenario pretty much. But one of these pullers makes it pretty easy most of the time. Next I'm going to remove the track bar, and I'm going to remove it at the axle side, really only because it's so much easier for me to get an impact wrench on this than on the other side. There's a little, you see this tab right here, there's a flag nut back in there that's self-captured. This is a 15 millimeter. We should be able to blast this right out. Famous last words. Let me get a breaker bar. Ooh. Sucker's in there pretty tight. Probably should have mentioned that would be a lot easier to get out if you put your jack under the pumpkin and take some of the weight off of the axle. But there's the flag nut. That's what it looks like. Next thing I'm going to do is free up the breather line. Now you can just cut the clamp here, pop the breather line off, and leave it in the donor vehicle. I don't want to spill gear oil all over my cement if I happen to twist this axle or whatever. So I'm going to take the breather hose with it. You can see it's connected here to the upper control arm, this upper link. So we're going to clip it there. Looks like that zip tie's already busted, and then it's just worked up here into the engine compartment on the back of the firewall. So I'll go ahead and fish it down and back out. And I'll just wrap it around the axle so it stays out of the way. Next I'm going to remove the sway bar links. It's a 15 millimeter nut. Yeah, or they just break off anyways. It's alright, I'm not going to reuse those. Now let's go hit the other side. Next I'm going to take off my calipers. This is a 13 millimeter bolt. There's two of them. Top one. And a bottom one. hopefully, if you're doing this in a junkyard, your calipers come off that easy. Now here's a little tip. Take a big thick piece of wire like this and just bend it in put a hook on both ends. You can hook it in the frame, hang your brake caliper on it, and that way you don't break or strain this line. And you can use this when you're doing brake jobs, anytime you have to mess with your hub or service your hub, and that way you don't break this brake line and leak your fluid out all over the place and have to bleed the whole system again. Go ahead and remove the disc. Now there's an important thing here. When you're switching to this newer style axle, make sure you grab the calipers. I've left them on the vehicle for now because I'm going to end up rebuilding them. But make sure you get those calipers with the axle. And I'll show you why. These newer style, you see how it's got these ears cast right into the knuckle, and then these two small holes here are where the caliper bolts on. If you've got an 87, and I'm not sure what year range, but if you've got an old enough vehicle, you may have a completely different knuckle and the brake calipers are not compatible. Let me show you on Project Tetanus what I mean. So take a look at this knuckle on Project Tetanus. This is an 87 Comanche. The 87 Cherokees have this same style knuckle. There's no ears. You can see how huge these holes are. It's because it's a completely different caliper. The ears are part of the caliper rather than part of the knuckle. So these brake calipers will not be compatible with that newer style axle. So just make sure you grab the calipers with that new axle. I'm going to go ahead and remove the springs next. To do that, we've got to remove this little spring retainer clip. It's a 13 millimeter. And hopefully I can get in there with my impact gun and a wobbly socket here. Just like that. And now we should be able to compress that spring and get it out of there. Now let's go ahead and get rid of these coil springs. And to do this, some people will wait, drop the upper and lower control arms and drop the whole axle down and leave these stuck to the axle. I would rather get them out of the way. To do that, you need some spring compressors. These are McPherson ones I got at AutoZone. Now you can rent these. They charge you the full price of the tool, which is like 65 bucks. And then if you bring them back, they refund all of your money. If you don't bring them back, then you just get to keep the tool. So I decided I was going to use these enough. I kept the tool. These, you hook these over the springs. You click these in to keep them on. And you want to get as much compression out of these as you possibly can. That's about as far as I can get on the reach on that. And then as you twist this screw, then it's going to compress this spring, and it hopefully will compress it enough that we can get it out from under this bump stop. And if you can get these exactly opposite of each other, it works a little better. You may not be able to. That might be enough. Let's see. Bingo. Alright, the last step to get this axle out is to remove the lower and upper control arms on both sides. I'm going to start with the lower control arms. I've supported the weight of the axle with my floor jack. You may want to put two jack stands under this. I'm going to try and lower it on the floor jack so I can just roll it out. So these are 21 millimeter. Let's see if I can get her done here. And of course it doesn't want to come out, it wants to hit the housing. That's lame. The bolt is so long it's hitting the pumpkin. So well, I'll figure it out. I'll either take it off here or I might be able to rotate the axle when I take the upper control arm off. I'm going to go ahead and take that off and see. Upper control arm mounts a 15 millimeter, and it has a flag nut on the back side, so I shouldn't need a wrench on the other side of this one. Shouldn't, unless I break the tab off of the flag nut. I can't get the upper control arms off of the axle without doing some major work. The little flag nuts on the back just aren't holding this bolt strong enough for me to get the nut off, and it's got such a short head on it I can't get a hold of it with vice grips. So I may have to try welding another head to it, or welding it to this control arm and pulling the thing off. We'll see. But to get the axle out, I'm going to go ahead and take the upper control arms off at the body. And to do that, there's a 21 millimeter nut on, or it's actually I think it's 15 millimeter nut on the inside in the engine compartment, and then there's a flag nut inside the body, and I'm going to try to pull this out and show you what it looks like. I've got to move my little brake caliper holder here, so for now we'll set that up on the axle, and let me just see if I can shimmy this thing out, show you what it looks like. There we go. Kind of a little bit tricky to get out of there because you can't really get your fingers in there. That's what it looks like. Alright, now if I can just get this bolt out of this bottom, this left-hand lower control arm, I should be able to get the axle out. Right. Well, I figured out why it was so hard for me to get that lower control arm bolt out. If you look at this lower control arm mount, you can see it's all bent. So I am going to I'm going to have to either straighten it or cut it off and put the lower control arm mount off of that other axle on here. I don't know if I can heat this and straighten it or not without screwing up the axle. But that's why that didn't want to come off. Looks like they've hit it pretty hard on a rock. So maybe check for that kind of damage before you go to pull an axle, so you can avoid the headache, and then that bolt should just come right out. Alright guys, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Now there's a lot of things I still need to do to this axle before I stick it back in Tetanus. I'm going to clean it up, paint it to match the rear. I've got to take these upper control arms off. All the steering is going to go, and the sway bar connects are going to go, because I'm going to replace all of that with a rough country lift kit. So stay tuned, that'll be coming in a separate video. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.